large number, but would love more of you to join just so that you can interact with some of the following questions that we're going to ask. So the agenda for today is fairly simple. We're just going to do a quick check-in via Menti just to get things started, and then we'll dive into the presentation from DCJ, and then following that, there'll be a Q&A session. So we would welcome, as Susan's mentioned, questions on the chat. There'll be a space for questions via Menti as well if you wish to remain anonymous, as well as if you'd like to put your hand up and come on video and speak to your question as well. That's all welcome. So we will finish off with a quick survey at the end as well. So please stick around. We'd really like to know how we are doing in terms of meeting the needs of the sector. So that's really the run through for today. So to kick things off, if you're already in Menti, we just want to know how you're feeling today, just in one word. And I can see quite a few things coming through already. We've got 160 on Menti, so that's a great number. All right, so curious is currently the strongest word sitting there, but I do see some other emotions as well. Some of you are feeling frustrated, apprehensive, and my eyes are struggling to track because there's so much happening right now. But yeah, thank you for being really candid about how you're feeling right now. I can see that there's a whole spectrum of emotions as you'd expect, just with the number of you here, but also just with the different feelings around your readiness and the timing of this process. So yeah, I can see, yeah, some of you are feeling positive, some of you are feeling tired, some of you are excited, some of you, there's a lot of sort of unsure, nervous, uncertain in there as well as quite a bit of optimism. Yeah, I'll give it 2 more seconds just for some of you to press that enter button. And we'll move on to the next question, which is, why are you feeling this way? So there's the whole gamut of emotions here, and I want to really acknowledge, for some of you, you're feeling energized, you're feeling that you know what your next steps are, and this is the moment you've been waiting for. For some of you, as student has mentioned as well, there's some of you in at 4% perhaps, who are feeling less positive about what's happening. There's some of you are feeling a bit anxious or frazzled. So yeah, just curious to know whether you're feeling positive, negative, unsure. What's the reason behind that? What's underlying that? Okay. Right, so unknown changes. Yep, that uncertainty of what lies in the future. Quite a few of you have mentioned that. Letters received, huge relief. I think we feel the same here at FAMS. Very frustrated around time frames has come up, and another comment around lead up time. Someone says they're excited, love your work. That's good, good to hear. It's been a long wait. Some of you are commenting on the workload challenges that have come up due to the length of time. Relieved to know your staff have security, employment. There's a mention of foundational supports. Seems to still be a question mark. Excited of the next 5 years, exhausted by process. So yeah, I acknowledge there's a lot of you are saying you're uncertain, and there's some of you who are feeling quite positive as well about what's lying ahead. And I'm hoping today's session as well is an opportunity to have some of those questions answered for those of you who are feeling uncertain. We won't obviously have time for every single question, but we will pass on whatever we can't answer in this session to DCJ. So yeah, if there are specific things that you want answered that will help with that uncertainty, this is definitely the place for it. But also for those of you who are feeling positive as well, you know, I ask you if there's any opportunity for you to lend your expertise, to lend sort of that knowledge to the rest of the sector around what it is that's made you feel positive. What is it that perhaps might help someone else in this contract negotiation process? Feel free to share that in the chat as well, where there's opportunity. And I know that everyone in the sector is so generous with their time and their wisdom. So yeah, it'd be good to see that too. Yeah, look, a lot of things coming true, and we'll capture all of this as well, perhaps in the summary at some point, which we can send out to everyone who's in this meeting. Yeah, excited about future work and uncertain about what's in the future as well. Some comments around specific bits of the funding is probably my summary here. And I can see there's a lot of questions around foundational supports as well, which I'm sure we'll be able to speak to some extent today. So if we move forward to a bit of a solution-focused space, what is one thing that you really want answered today? If you left this sector conversation having just one question answered, what would it be? What would be the best use of your time? And I think I'm really conscious there's now 256 of you sitting in this meeting. So it is really a case of us trying our best to, yeah, identify what's going to be the best use of your time today. What questions are really going to help you understand how to navigate these next steps into the CAFS program. Um, right, so some questions around potential future funding, process and timeframes, next steps, how to negotiate successfully. I'm just going to scroll up a little bit as well and see these earlier ones. Questions around why funding amount and target numbers aren't mentioned in the invitation to negotiate. Pointers as we move towards negotiation, and there should be some of that today. Questions about local priorities, wanting clarity and timeframes for decision making. And a lot of mention around negotiations. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of questions which I would sort of translate into questions around evidence-based or things like your place-based sort of data, as well as what proof is required from you to show the groups that you're running are working for your community. Things around KPIs as well and guidelines. As mentioned before as well, if you're feeling like Menti isn't the best space for this as well, you feel free to pop it into the chat here as well, and we'll try to come back to some of these questions and sort of priorities later on. And it's good. I really appreciate all of you sharing this as well. It helps us get a bit of a sense check just to make sure that we are meeting as many of these key questions today as we can. And for those of you who we can't necessarily answer in this forum as well, we'll do our best to put these questions, as we've mentioned, to DCJ and hopefully provide an answer. But if all of that fails as well, we do encourage you to reach out to us directly as well if there's sort of anything that we can sort of be doing to provide more clarity. And I can see that's a key word that's coming out in a lot of these questions here. Yeah, and there's a lot of questions around how things are going to change. A lot of questions around, yeah, the expectations and targets. Thanks, Cass. And Cass has just popped in the FAM's email on the chat as well. So if you'd like to reach out to us directly. All of that being conscious, yeah, there is a lot of people here. There are a lot of questions here. So I am conscious we aren't necessarily going to be able to meet the needs of everyone. We'll do our best. But certainly that's another avenue for you to reach out to us if there's sort of outstanding questions from today's session. All right, and there's questions around, and I really appreciate that someone's asked a question on how can you advocate to change service types in your new contract to best meet the needs of your community. And yeah, I think the question around sort of your why and what you're doing and wanting to do that well, I think that speaks to the heart of our sector. I'm sure a lot of you are in various different ways, whether or not you are seeking to negotiate a change in the way that you work, you're still thinking about what's best for your community, what's best for the people that you work with, the children that you are trying to do some life-changing work with. So yeah, I really appreciate that focus, which is so key in our sector. I will leave this up here, but really our next bit is that presentation from DCJ, and hopefully that answers some of the questions that you have. Again, throughout that presentation as well, I just invite all of you, the chat's open, the Menti will also be open. I'll leave this page open once we switch to DCJ slides for anyone to add sort of additional priorities here, and then we will have a space for questions and answers following the presentation as well. So yeah, I encourage you all to continue to ask questions, continue to interact, and raise your hand as well if there's anything that you really need. But without further ado, I'm happy to hand over to Anthony if you'd like to start with your presentation.
Great. Thanks, Daniel. Before I begin, I'd just like to acknowledge country and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to Aboriginal people, and acknowledge that today I'm coming to you from Barmadigal land. Thanks for the opportunity this afternoon to talk with you around the contract negotiations for the Targeted Early Intervention and Family Connection Support Program, going forward obviously into the new Community and Family Support Program, which will commence on 1 January. So as you probably would have seen from information that went out to the sector yesterday, we have sent all letters to Targeted Early Intervention and Family Connection Support Service providers as of yesterday. And as noted in some previous information that went out to the sector, 96% of those contracts in the TEI program and 100% in the Family Connection Support program have been invited to negotiate a new contract in the CAFS program commencing 1 January. So this afternoon, I intend to run through some information around the contract negotiation process. Yeah, excuse me, obviously, if you have any questions, happy to answer those as well. Okay, so to start with, just a bit of a high-level summary here of the negotiation process with which we'll sit down with you over the coming months. So 5 steps here, as you can see. The first step's really about invitation to negotiate a contract. So as of yesterday, as mentioned, letters went out to providers inviting those organisations to negotiate a new contract in the CAFS program. Second step really is about really the start of the negotiation process. So we'll start to meet with providers, between now and December. Those meetings will kick off soon. There'll be an initial meeting. There'll probably be a series of meetings to finalise contracts with providers. That initial meeting is an opportunity for to have some preliminary discussions around the negotiation. While the negotiation's occurring, obviously we'll ask you to provide some information to us, and we'll also to talk with you around what we'd like to negotiate with you in your contract. So we will ask you, and I'll go into detail about some of these things in later slides, we'll ask you to submit a budget, which will be really helpful to inform discussions around service levels in the contract and also client numbers. There may be, in some instances with some providers, there may be a series of meetings. Other providers, if the negotiation is much more straightforward, there might be a small number of meetings. So really will depend on the circumstances of what both provider and DCJ are looking to kind of negotiate in that contract. The fourth step there involves us sending you, following a series of meetings with you, sending you a draft contract. And this is really just a draft. We'll also send you a form to sign as well, which if you're happy with the draft of that contract, the form is really just to confirm that you're happy with the draft and the budget that you've negotiated. At that point, we're not asking you to sign the contract. It's just a form that confirms your agreement with what's been negotiated, which then helps us move to the last step, which is to draft up the final contract. And we'll then send that final contract in step 5 for you to sign. And that's kind of where we, and we'll sign that obviously as well, execute the contract, and we'll put that into our payment system, and all going well, payments will commence in January. So just going through to the next slide, you'll see here just a little bit of information around the structure of the documents that will comprise what's known as the CAFS contract. So you'll probably be familiar with the agreement for funding of services, which includes the standard terms. That's typically the Human Services Agreement, which I know we've been using in the TEI program. There'll also be a CAFS schedule attached to that. And then attached to the schedule itself, there'll be 3 attachments. So one is what we're calling the services table. There'll be 2 tables there. That's the tables where we we'll negotiate and agree some of the detail around outputs and client numbers and locations and so forth. The second attachment is the CAFS program specifications. So they're currently on our DCJ website now. So they do comprise part of the contract. Really encourage you to have a look at those specifications and read them all the way through before you sit down to do your negotiation. A lot of you will have been part of the process around the consultation series we had around redesigning those specifications. So we have made some changes to the program. And obviously that's based on the evaluation feedback we've had from the sector and the consultation process, and obviously some of the evidence work that we've done over the last couple of years. And the last attachment there, as you'll see, is a budget, an annual forecast budget, which we'll look to agree with you, and that will comprise part of the contract as well. Okay, next slide. These are really kind of, this is really where we get to the kind of heart of the negotiation, really. These are the things that will be discussed during the negotiation. So what we would like to discuss with you and what we'd like you to discuss with us is, these key kind of components that will comprise what we actually agree to go in the contract. So, the what, the program activities and service types that we discussed with you in the negotiation. The who, so what target groups and what local priority groups that we'll be looking to agree with you to go into contracts. The where, so the geographical coverage of service delivery. The why, so that's really the outcomes that we're all looking for to be delivered through the contract. And then also how much. So, looking at, we want to discuss with you sustainable service levels, and obviously the budget, which is really linked to that as well. In the next few slides, we'll go through these 5 key things in a bit more detail. So the first is the what. So we want to talk with you around what program activities and service types will be delivered in your contract. So as you're probably aware, we're bringing together the Family Connect and Support and TEI program into the new CAFS program. So the new CAFS program will have 3 program activities: community strengthening, Family Connect and Support, and wellbeing and safety. And under each of those program activities, you'll see there's a number of service types. A lot of these service types and program activities will be familiar to you in the existing TEI program and the Family Connect and Support program. There has been some changes, obviously, particularly to the service types. We have streamlined some and the program activities as well. Importantly, we've included some new ones as well, such as youth individualised support, which was based on quite a lot of feedback from the youth sector. So again, encourage you to go into the program specifications, have a look at these program activities, have a look at these service types. There is an appendix which has a detailed definition of each of these service types. So it's really important that you're across, what these service types are about and, where they sit in which program activities. So a bit of information under that, I guess, in regards to parenting programs and supported playgroups. So, they're both service types that fit within wellbeing and safety. So as you know, there's a new process for providers who are contracted to deliver a parenting program or supported playgroup. And the first thing we want you to do if you're considering delivering one of those is to have a look at the list of evidence-informed programs of both parenting programs and supported playgroups that on the DCJ website. There's links in the on the DCJ website and information about both of those lists of evidence-informed programs, and they're programs that we've compiled based on research and evidence that have demonstrated outcomes for children, young people and families. And so we'd really encourage you to have a look at those. If there's a program on that list you think suits your circumstances, the context in which you're delivering services, the client cohorts you're supporting, the geographical location you're in, the funding envelope that you have, if there's something on that list that you think would work in your community, we'd really encourage you to choose a program from that list to deliver or to talk to us about delivering. However, obviously, if none of those programs fit the circumstances and context in which you're looking to deliver a parenting program or supported playgroup, you do have the opportunity to complete a form to apply to deliver a locally applied program or model under both of those service types. So we understand the research evidence base is limited in some respects. It's not going to fit all circumstances. And so, if you are interested in doing that, go onto the DCJ website. There's quite a bit of information around that process. There's a bit of a flow chart which kind of steps out how you do that. There's information around, the form and how to complete the form. So importantly, one thing to note, if you are interested in delivering a locally applied program, is that we ask that you don't fill out that form before you come to the negotiation. Come to the negotiation. I would recommend that, early on in the conversation you have with the commissioning and planning team, you indicate that if you are interested in delivering a locally applied program, that's what you want to do. And then they'll let you know to go away and fill out the form and then submit that. So you'll complete the form, send it in. It'll come into the team where I work in central office, and we'll assess that. And then we'll provide the outcome of that back to the commissioning and planning team, which will then inform the next stage of negotiations with you. Another important thing to note in regards to Indigenous parenting programs and Indigenous supported playgroups, if you're an ACO delivering one of those service types, or you're a non-ACO with Aboriginal staff delivering one of those service types to a predominantly Aboriginal client cohort, you're not required to use the evidence-informed list. You are allowed to deliver, you will be able to deliver a locally applied program. You won't necessarily need to complete the form to get approval to do that. We are encouraging you to complete the form to help us understand the evidence base and to help build the evidence around ACO parenting programs and Indigenous parenting programs and Indigenous supported playgroups, but there's not a formal approval process which you need to go through to do that. But and you don't need to complete the form before finalising your contract. So you can finalise your contract and send us that information in the next couple of months. But we're encouraging you to complete the form. So just reiterating, the list of evidence-informed programs for parenting programs and supported playgroups is not mandatory for service providers. We do encourage you, obviously, to look at that list and use that. We have put quite a bit of funding into supporting training around a number of some supported playgroup models, which some providers have indicated they're interested in doing, but it's not mandatory. And also for Indigenous parenting programs and Indigenous supported playgroups, it's not mandatory either. Okay, next slide, thank you. So this just a bit of a snapshot of our website, which gives you an indication of where this information is in relation to parenting programs and supported playgroups. Some of you may have already had a look at this, but it's on the DCJ webpage beside the draft, or we should change that draft TEI program specifications. We'll do that soon. We'll update that to, that's that tile. Okay, so when we're thinking about the who, and we'll be looking to discuss with you, who you'll be providing support to. So obviously in the CAFS program, a lot of you will know the target group is families, young people, children and communities in need. That's the broader target group for the program. And we do have a number of priority groups, within the program. A lot of these you should be familiar with. They're currently being delivered through the TEI program and Family Connected and Support. So Aboriginal children, young people and families and communities, 0 to 5-year-olds, children and young people at risk of disengagement from school, family and community, young parents with known vulnerabilities or who are experiencing a number of hardships, and children and young people affected by mental health conditions. So these are the kind of priority target groups with which we'd like to discuss with you around increasing some of our service delivery and investment to these target groups. But as you know, we do have the wider target group, which is vulnerable, which is families, children, young people and communities in need. There'll obviously also be some local priorities with which you may wish to discuss with us, and also we may wish to discuss with you as well in regards to target groups. So that may be another thing that's on the table for discussion. On a side note, you will also note in the program specifications there is another priority group which is around child development, children 0 to 9 with developmental concern. We're not really looking to contract people to deliver support to that target group now. We've really kind of put that in and included some other information in the program specifications around child development, really to kind of build in some kind of future proofing around what may happen with foundational supports, thriving kids, and just and if I'll talk a bit about that at the end of this slide presentation, if that opportunity comes to the CAFS program to be able to deliver any of that service with extra investment, then the program is fit to do that. But that other priority target group of children 0 to 9 is our intention is not to contract people now to deliver that. Okay, geographical coverage. So in the contract, we do want to list the geographical coverage of where services are being delivered. So it's not where clients come from or clients live, it's where you will be delivering services from. So we'll look to note that at the local government area level. So at the LGA level, it'll include LGAs in your contract, and that's where your services are being delivered from. You may wish to note in your contract locations at a more granular level, possibly suburbs. You're able to do that if you like, just able to negotiate that with your commissioning and planning staff. But LGA level is kind of where we're starting from. That also doesn't mean that you can only service clients in that LGA. You can obviously support and work with clients outside of that LGA, but we need to note in the contract where you will be delivering services from. Okay, so when we look at the why, we want to talk to you about client outcomes. That's really about kind of why we're delivering services, what outcomes we're looking to achieve through the activity. So when we look at client outcomes, we're asking that at least one client outcome for all service types needs to be included in the contract. So if you're delivering a service type, there must be at least one client outcome against that, except for community sector coordination. So community sector coordination service type will no longer report through DEX. It will have its own reporting tool. So you don't need to put a client outcome against community sector coordination. But for all other service types, we need at least one outcome, and you will continue to report through DEX. You do have the option to include Aboriginal outcomes as well in the contract. So we have done quite a bit of work with our ACCO partners in the CAFS program around developing an Aboriginal outcomes framework. That's now included in the program specifications, and we're continuing to talk with our ACCO partners around, what next steps might look like around that. But at the moment, it's optional in terms of including that outcome, but certainly, that's important to the communities in which you're working and for your organisation. We encourage you to do that. You can include that alongside your, general CAFS client outcome. There's no requirement to do any formal reporting on the Aboriginal outcome. And lastly, we also have service system outcomes in the program. You would have hopefully seen those in the program specifications. They only apply for contracts where the community sector coordination service type is being delivered. So if you're delivering the community sector coordination service type, you'll put a service system outcome against that, not a client outcome. And as I mentioned, you won't be reporting your community sector coordination data into DEX. You'll have a separate community coordination, a sector coordination reporting tool to do that. DEX really now, we only want to be about client data, not services that are being delivered to NGOs under community sector coordination. So table 2 is, where this outcome information will be captured. So if you remember back on the schedule, I talked about table 2 in appendix 1 of the schedule. And so the next thing is really we want to talk to you about as part of the negotiation is how much. So what are the service levels and kind of what is the budget? So we will ask you to complete a budget template as part of the negotiation process, which, as I mentioned, will be part of the contract. Now that budget template is up on our DCJ website. If you have a look at the TEI form that went out, there's a link to a fact sheet around contract negotiation. That's the key kind of information resource around negotiations. We'd encourage you to have a look at that. Click on it. Within that negotiation fact sheet, it includes links to a number of resources that are available to you, one of which is the budget template. Now, this budget template will ask you to provide information within the funding envelope that you have around salaries and wages, other employee-related expenses, direct contract-related costs, indirect contract administration costs as well. So every line item in that budget does not need to be filled out, only the relevant ones that apply to you, but you'll need to break down your costs so that they do add up to your total funding amount, and there'll be a relevant line item for any cost that you have in your kind of service delivery kind of budget envelope. So in the past, for example, we have negotiated and agreed things such as, a percentage component for an admin cost. We'll no longer be doing that. We'll ask you to actually break down that admin cost and tell us what the actual cost is against all relevant line items. So for some organisations, that may be a different way of putting together the budget for this program that you've done in the past. But we ask you to have a look at the budget template, have a look at your costs, and kind of build those costs in. So, we have heard a lot from the sector around increasing costs of service delivery. We've heard that message loud and clear. We want to understand what those costs are. The best way for us to understand those costs is for you to, tell us what those costs are and kind of where they are in your budget. That will then help us to negotiate and agree with you sustainable client outputs in the contract. Okay, so data reporting and collection and reporting. The data collection and reporting will remain an important part of the program. A lot of you might have heard me say the data is really important. We use that data to do the TEI evaluation. Would not have been able to do the outcomes evaluation or the economic component of the evaluation without the program data. So we'll ask you to continue to collect data in DEX. As I mentioned, community sector coordination service type data will no longer be reported in DEX. There'll be the separate reporting tool for that. We will have a copy of the updated data collection and reporting guide on the website shortly for you to look at, so keep an eye out for that. You're all using DEX now, so that won't change. So, but as you do know, in the new program specifications, there has been some streamlining of service types. There's been a few new service types added, so that may mean you might need to, make some changes, obviously, to your outlets or service types. And if you negotiate and agree to deliver new service types, you may need to make a change to your DEX collection. But hopefully you'll have some time to do that. And the data reporting guide will give you some guidance around reporting in the program. The last thing to mention is program logics. So new program logics will continue to be mandatory in the CAFS program. We've had a lot of feedback around program logics, the value of them in the program. We've made quite a lot of changes to the program logic templates in the new specifications. If you had a look, you'll see there's some ticker boxes that will help streamline it. There's some drop downs. We've pre-populated the evidence columns as well based on our evidence review. So we're hoping that those templates will be a bit more user-friendly. We do encourage you to have a look at the program logic e-module to help you kind of develop those program logics. Importantly, to note, program logics won't be due until the 1st of June 2026. So you don't need to complete your program logic until June 26 next year. So there's no requirement to complete a program logic before you come to negotiations or before you finalise your contract. That won't be due until June 26. So you will have some time to do it. Obviously, you'll need to negotiate and agree your contract, and then, you know, you'll be able to do your program logic. Because if there's things that you negotiate that you're currently not doing, obviously you'll need to know what they are to put them in your program logic. Some people may wish to kind of work up a bit of a draft program logic before they come to the negotiations. Nothing wrong with that at all. And some providers have indicated that's a helpful way for them to start to think about how they want to deliver services, and, you know, think about the reason why they're delivering services. So please feel free to do that if you so wish. But as I said, it's not mandatory to do that. And lastly, just touching on foundational supports and thriving kids. So current state of play is that the Australian government is still currently negotiating with states and territories around the agreement around foundational supports and thriving kids. So we don't know what that agreement looks like yet. Still hasn't been agreed. When it is, though, then that will help inform New South Wales continued design and implementation of foundational supports to thriving kids. There's quite a bit of consultation underway, as you know, with communities and with service providers around that. So that those consultations will continue. Once the agreement's landed, we'll have more of an idea of you know, what the service model might look like and what implementation might look like. We're thinking that the CAFS program, service types of supported playgroups, parenting programs, and family capacity building, you know, might be fit for purpose for delivering, you know, some foundational supports and thriving kids. But again, we won't know for sure until that agreement's landed and the design work is done, the final design work is done. But we are interested in gauging your interest in delivering foundational support to thriving kids if the opportunity were to come to the CAFS program to do some of that. So at the end of contract negotiations, we will ask you some market sounding questions to gauge your interest in delivering foundational supports and thriving kids. We have some information in a fact sheet that's again on our website. If you click on the contract negotiation fact sheet, you'll be able to link through to that foundational supports thriving kids fact sheet. Just to note, your responses to any of those market sounding questions will have no bearing whatsoever on the outcome of your contract negotiations for CAFS. And this is also not a process around identifying who will deliver foundational supports. It's just simply a market sounding exercise to understand your interest in any possible options around foundational supports in the CAFS program. As I mentioned, there's other consultation work, and there'll be future market sounding work happen outside of CAFS, obviously, once the agreement's landed and we know more about what that looks like. Okay, that's the information for me. I'm sure people have questions. I've seen some questions popping up in the chat, but yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I've also just opened up the Menti again. So there's a couple of questions here, a couple that I've drawn out of the previous question around key points. So I've summarized a couple on here, but I just want to be also respectful. We had a question sort of pretty much as we started, if you're happy to answer it, Anthony, around the process in which the contracts that were not renewed, what was the process for determining that, and what was the role of CPOs in that process, as well as the appeals process. So that was one of the first questions that came in, if you'd like to comment on that.
Yeah, look, I understand. You know, we did have 4% of TEI contracts who were not offered the opportunity to negotiate a new contract. I really can't speak to the individual circumstances of those contracts in this session. I would really encourage those providers to contact their commissioning and planning staff around those questions.
Thanks, Anthony. And I'll move on to a couple of the key themes that came out of that previous key question mentee. One of the most frequently asked ones was around this thing here on the shared screen around whether funding amounts can be varied as part of the contract negotiations. And there's sort of questions both ways around whether reducing KPIs would reduce the amount of funding, as well as whether there's opportunities to scale up in that regard as well.
So the short answer is we only have the funding that we have available in the program. So the funding amount that you have in your contract will be the funding amount, the current funding amount that we negotiate with you on. Obviously, there's been some indexation, which will increase it slightly, but that will be the funding envelope with which we negotiate with you. Whatever outputs, client outputs we agree with you will have no bearing on the funding level. Your funding level is your funding level. So what we agree with you won't decide whether your funding goes up or down.
Yep. And another popular one on the Menti as well, which has had a few votes, was around the proposed changes to the shared award. I believe that's from the Fair Work Commission Gender Undervaluation Review. It may impact how we pay workers if that's not finalized before contracts are finalized. What supports will DCJ provide if costs escalate?
Well, as I mentioned, we really only have the funding that we have in the program. If you're aware of kind of costs that are going, if you're aware of costs, you really should put them in your budget. We don't have any additional funding at the moment in the program to add in for any other cost increases in relation to other matters, apart from obviously indexation that comes through.
All right, and I'll pull from the chat now, just so that I'm being a bit fair. There's a question around, is the reason that the new specifications have mentioned around families living with ASD, is that due to foundational supports?
Yes, so that other priority target group that I mentioned, children with developmental concern 0 to 9, yes, is a target group we've included that, if foundational supports thriving kids agreements landed and there is an opportunity for the CAFS program to be involved in the delivery of that, then we've included that as a kind of bit of a future proofing so that the program really is able to kind of just, pick up on that cohort and, deliver services. As I mentioned, supported playgroups, parenting programs, family capacity building, they're the types of service types that we think, broadly speaking, might kind of fit broadly under an umbrella of foundational supports. But again, there's no agreement on that yet, and there's no, information or clarity yet on any of that. But we've included it as a kind of a future proofing, option.
Right, and I'm just looking through the chat now. There's also a few questions from people asking whether or not they'll be notified of the amount they'll be funded prior to contract negotiations, and if there's a unit costing as well as part of that. There's a few questions around that.
So obviously, when you sit down with your commissioning and planning staff, they will, yes, provide you the amount of the funding amount that they'll negotiate, that will be discussed and negotiated. Your contract will be, the negotiations of your contract will be based on. As I mentioned, that funding amount, won't increase or decrease depending on the negotiation. The funding amount is the funding amount, but they will make you aware of that. There's no unit costing in the TEI program now. There's no unit costing in the CAFS program going forward.
Yep, and in relation to that, there was also a question around whether there'll be a called culturally and linguistically diverse loading as there is in Family Pres in the CAFS program.
No, there's no loadings in the CAFS program.
All right, I will just move back to the Menti then, just to try and make sure that we're meeting both. There were a few questions in the chat about this as well. When do negotiations need to be completed by?
We're aiming to have all negotiations, if we can, completed by mid to end November. That'll give us time to get all that information into our payment system and enable payments to occur as they do in January. Look, there may be some stragglers that kind of go into, some negotiations that extend into December. There's quite a lot, there's 600 odd contracts to negotiate, so we will be up against a bit of time pressure, but we can still negotiate, finalise those in December. Yep.
Thanks, Emily. Sorry for the quick fire questions. Hope you're
That's right.
doing okay. All right. The next one is, oh, it's popular. What if your CPO doesn't answer?
I'm not sure what you mean. What, it doesn't answer the phone?
I think yeah, probably in terms of maybe there's a good conversation around. I think there's a couple of questions around the escalation points as well. If there's sort of challenges in that process with, if things aren't going to plan in that negotiation process, what's perhaps the next step?
Look, certainly if you've got a question, pick up the phone, talk to your commissioning and planning officer like you do now. You obviously have their email and their phone number. You have a contract manager. When you sit down to do the negotiations, there will be 2 DCJ staff that will be a part of that. We also require you to have 2 people as well at a minimum. If you're unhappy with the way things are proceeding with the negotiation, we have the manager, commissioning and planning. Across the state, we also have directors, commissioning and planning, and our executive director, commissioning and planning as well. So that escalation process that's there now will continue to be there throughout the process.
And if there are service providers who aren't clear about who's the contact person beyond their CPO, what's the best way of them sort of figuring that out?
I would recommend they ask their CPO that.
Okay.
They should be able to tell them.
All right. The next question on the Menti is, how will supported playgroup models be recorded in DEX? What's the way that those playgroups be measured in DEX?
Well, the way they're being measured now really hasn't changed. Have a look at the new data reporting guide. The way that you report supported playgroups in DEX won't change. Is there
There wasn't further clarity. If someone would like to type either in the chat or speak out, feel free as well to put your hand up in the Zoom. But yeah, not sure that I'm seeing anything come through right now. Perhaps we'll move on and then we'll come back to that if we need to. There's a question around the 4% of contracts that aren't being renewed. What's being done with the money that's was allocated 4%? Is it staying within districts? Is it going to ACCOs?
that will be subject to procurement sometime in 2026. We don't really have any information about that as yet.
All right, I will just pop back into the chat. So there's a few questions in the chat around, early in your presentation, you mentioned that the area they're contracted to deliver services is the area that they're delivering it in. The families and children don't necessarily need to reside in that area. There's a few questions around things such as if they're running an online group, can participants be outside of that area, as well as cross-border support? So those on the sort of New South Wales border with other states, are they able to provide services to families who live in a different state, but then attend their premises?
Look, we do have online services being delivered now. So again, I would encourage those relevant providers that are doing that now to, they're aware of the arrangement they have in place now. Sit down with your commissioning and planning officer when you're doing negotiations and talk through that. If there's other organisations that are interested in moving into the online space, again, sit down with the commissioning and planning officer and have that conversation with them.
I'm just looking at the chat as well. There's a couple of questions in the chat around whether or not the 1.2% calculated difference due to the long service leave scheme will be included in the funding of services. Will that be an increase that's accounted for?
So again, the funding envelope that you have now will be the funding envelope that you negotiate your contract with. That won't change. And there may be other questions around increased costs. The funding envelope you have now in your contract is the funding envelope that you'll sit down to negotiate your contract with. Obviously, as I mentioned, there's indexation been applied this year to that, so it will increase slightly. But that's the funding envelope, yes.
And then on Menti, we've got a question around foundational supports. Will that come with additional funding?
At this stage, we don't know until that agreement between Australian government and states and territories still has not been reached. So, yeah, we have no clarity on any of that information in regards to funding.
Yeah. And then there's another question on Menti around if there's no unit cost and the funding amount's already determined, what are we negotiating?
Well, what you'll be negotiating is the 5 things that I discussed with you in the presentation. So, what program activities and service types you'll look to agree to deliver in your program, what target groups you'll be supporting, whether there's any kind of local priority groups in that, what's the geographical coverage of your service delivery, what outcomes you'll be looking to deliver in the contract, what the budget is for your contract. And when I say budget, obviously the total amount is set, but obviously some of the line items in that budget may be subject to negotiation, and then obviously the service levels as well.
All right. I've just had someone come back to me about that supported playgroup DEX question. If you're okay to answer that, Anthony. So they were clarifying, they're asking, for example, if they've chosen Smalltalk as their model, are they recording against each family or parent to recognize this program is delivered to measure effectiveness? Sorry, I'm not fully understanding the question myself, but yeah.
Well, look, what I can say is recording supported playgroups or Smalltalk, for example, index in terms of a client, the principle is we record individual clients in DEX in the CAFS program. We don't record families. So same principle will apply to supported playgroups, i.e. Smalltalk, if that's kind of what the question's about.
Yeah, right. I think someone's also trying to clarify that perhaps they're asking, is there a need or a way to identify the model that you're using as well to sort of identify that it's working and whether that will happen moving forward, whether you're required to sort of identify in your reporting the model that you're using.
Well, working out what model you're using will be part of your contract negotiation. So if you're looking to deliver a supported playgroup, you'll negotiate with commissioning your CPO, that service type, and if you're choosing to or looking to deliver an evidence-informed model or a locally designed model, again, that'll be part of the negotiations. That'll be kind of agreed up front before you actually sign the contract, before then you start reporting in DEX. You really only need to get you get agreement on that in your contract negotiation, contract signed, you deliver that. If you wish to change the model, have a conversation with your CPO. We have a very streamlined variation clause in our contract which allows providers to do that. But you don't, yeah, that's if that's kind of what the question's asking. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I think that is along the lines of what it's asking. There's another question on the Menti. There's quite a few. The next one's how will numbers be determined in partnership activities?
I'd probably direct you to the data and reporting guide around that, and also a conversation with your CPO in the contract negotiations. Yeah, we do have obviously some information around how that's done now, but have a look in the updated guide and talk to your CPO.
Yeah, I'm just skipped a couple of questions that I believe we've already answered. Yep, you've answered the 4%. I think this question is around if there's an ACO that hasn't received funding moving forward. I'm not entirely clear about that, but you have commented on what's happening with the 4%. Will the budget that you're filling out be assessed? If so, are there guidelines, expectation of wage costs, program costs, things like that?
Certainly, we'll be assessing the budget template that you provide to us. That's obviously part of the negotiation. We do need to agree on the forecast budget template, but that's really up to you to build your costs into that budget and provide them to us to obviously to have a look at and negotiate with you. Everybody's, a lot of organizations have different ways that they structure their kind of business and manage their costs. So there's no specific direct, TEI budget guidance around that, or CAFS, I should say.
Thank you. I'll take that up. I think you have covered this in terms of talking about supported playgroups, but there is a question again around the model. Is it mandatory to do small talk if you're running a playgroup? But I believe, yes, you've sort of covered the options in terms of choosing one from the evidence base or varying through the form and the process.
Yes.
And to those of you who are still confused as well, there's a whole page on the DCJ website around supported playgroups and parenting programs that might provide a bit more clarity, as well as some flowcharts. We can also, I can pop that in the chat soon as well, if that's helpful. All right, so next question is, the new guidelines mention therapeutic care in family capacity building. What is the understanding or interpretation of therapeutic care?
Look, I'd encourage you to have a look at the, sorry, my light's going out of my room. I'd encourage you to have a look in the service, the program specifications around that. There's information in the guidelines around that, so kind of refer you back to there as the starting point.
Yeah, and I think we have popped in the chat, if you haven't already seen, the contract negotiation resources on the DCJ website, with the program logic information, budget templates, and other things as well. So again, checking out that link might answer some of these questions. It's really good opportunity as well before you head into your contract negotiations to really sort of familiarize yourself with the content that's there. And then obviously after looking through those various flowcharts and documents, if there's further questions, it's definitely welcome for you to reach out either to DCJ or to your CPO to sort of, well, sorry, I'll correct myself, your CPO, or to, the sort of, there's a specific email, isn't there, Anthony, for questions around the CAFS specs, and if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we have a TEI mailbox.
Yes, that's right, the TEI mailbox.
Yep,
Thank you.
TEI at DCJ.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. There's a question around the 4%, whether they were given sort of advance notice around the ending of their funding. I'm not sure if you want to comment on that, Anthony.
Look, as I mentioned at the start, we're really not going into individual circumstances around those organisations at this session.
There's a question around, is there rationale for communities in practice and interagencies being taken out of sector coordination?
Yes, as a decision by government in terms of the recommissioning, agencies and communities of practice are no longer part of the sector coordination service type.
Yeah. I noticed, going back to the chat, there's been a couple of questions around the time frame in terms of the budget, because of the 5.5-year contract. Is it a 6 month budget for the first year and then submitting a new budget every year, or what's the sort of time frame that people should be drafting up a budget for?
You just do one budget template for a 12-month period. It's an annualized forecast. You just do it once. We sign the contract. You're not required to do it each year.
Thanks, Anthony. There's a question around DEX data changing. Will it change to include more to reflect the work we do? And I think that's also a question probably around sort of deliverables in relation to that as well, I'm assuming. Do you have sort of any comments on that one?
Look, the DEX data has been streamlined. We have removed a number of duplication service types, some that weren't being used. We've reduced some program activities. So certainly the data reporting is much more streamlined. It is the quantitative data for the program. It's the program data. It's quantitative. Quantitative data in and of itself is really quantitative data. Obviously, it doesn't cover all the kind of work that providers do, but it's not intended to. It's meant to collect the quantitative data for the program, and that's what it'll continue to do.
Thank you. Yeah, we've already answered this question. So before we move on to the rest of some of the Menti questions, I just want to invite, if there's anyone who maybe isn't as comfortable sort of typing either in Menti or in the chat, if there's anyone who would like to ask a question just out loud, if you haven't had the opportunity yet to type something in, raise your hand as well. We just want to welcome that as well. I know that text isn't always the best solution, and I know that I'm sort of doing my best to sort of pick from two sources as well, so it's not intentional if I missed your question. So really I just want to invite you, if there's a complicated question as well that doesn't sort of translate well to text, feel free to put your hand up and we can take a question there. There's a question around whether you budget for material aid, so there's a lot of these questions coming in around the budget templates. Would you say that that's something that would be sort of covered in the
what I
budget?
would encourage you to do is have a look at the budget template. It's online, and there is all the line items that are in the budget template are the line items that we'll look at. It's comprehensive, so the line items that are in the budget template are all able to be costed against in terms of our program. So I'd encourage you to have a look at that as a starting point.
Thank you. And I will just do a couple more and then we can move on to perhaps some of the other scaling questions that we have. This question around, again, that escalation process, if you've not been invited to negotiate beyond 31st December.
Well, contract negotiations will start soon, so certainly all providers would have commenced their negotiation before December. So, you know, you will have a local commissioning and planning contact who you are negotiating your contract with. So that would be the contact that if for some reason your contract is not finalised by 31st of December, they're the kind of person you'll actively be in those conversations with those commissioning and planning staff. So yeah, look, I'm not sure whether we'll be in that circumstance. We may be. We're not envisaging that, but certainly, as I mentioned before, there'll be two staff involved, commissioning and planning officers. They do have a manager. Manager reports to Director Commissioning and Planning for a location, and then a Director Commissioning and Planning reports to an Executive Director who oversees all of the whole commissioning and planning staff across the state.
Thank you. Yes, there's a question around if you're in an area where a service isn't funded, moving forward, will they be informed so that they can identify potential gaps that might exist due to that?
Look, certainly if you're interested in providing services in other locations, you know, you're able to raise that in the negotiation. I mean, there's no reason why you can't. You know, as we said, geographical coverage is one of the kind of things that will be discussed in the negotiation, and that's what the kind of question's asking.
All right, I can see we've got a hand up as well. Kim, if you'd like to, put your question.
Hi, Anthony.
Hi, Kim.
Just wanted to know about the program logic. How often are you expecting us to do that? Is it or are we just going to keep talking to our CPOs about it?
It's annually, so it's annually at the moment.
It's an annual one?
Yeah, we'll keep that as annually. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, there's another question around sort of changing service, but I assume that that's been answered already in terms of.
Yes,
Yeah.
so certainly if you're interested in delivering other service types or you're currently delivering, you'll have the opportunity to have that conversation in the negotiations. And look, certainly we'll have some changes that we'll look to negotiate with you as well around those service types. So that's part of the negotiation.
There's also another question around, which I think you've already commented on, but yeah, just to clarify, are there any programs in which funding would be reduced currently?
So the funding for the Targeted Early Intervention program and the Family Connect and Support program will come together and comprise the Community and Family Support program. That funding won't change. As I mentioned, obviously there's indexation this year, but apart from that, the funding amount is the same.
All right, we'll just do one last one and then let's move on to the survey questions. And apologies that we can't get to everything. Oh, sorry, that actually has been answered. It's another budget question. I'm not sure if you just want to refer to the budget template, but it is about, yeah, with current funding finishing in December and our budgets are done financial year annually, how much room is there to move on expenses over December, Jan in acquittals?
Yeah, so there is information in our TEI inform that went out yesterday around TEI contracts, and all TEI contracts obviously end at the end of December. And for those 96% of providers who are being invited to negotiate a new contract, you will obviously negotiate and look to agree a new contract, and that'll start in January, and your payments obviously then will continue in January. But for all TEI providers, there is end of contract financial requirements that information is on the DCJ website. The link is in the TEI inform, and it will require if there's any unexpended funds at the end of contracts in December for those to be returned to DCJ.
Thanks, Anthony.
Sorry, in regards to acquittals is an annual process. Will only require you to provide an income and expenditure statement against the end of December, but obviously your annual acquittal, your audit, etc., will occur in the normal time frame.
Great. As I said, we'll do our best to collate the questions in the chat and the questions in Menti, as well as anything else you send through to us. And yeah, we'll do our best as well to respond to those in due time. We do have a conference obviously on Thursday, but hopefully we'll take the questions on notice, pass that on to DCJ, and hopefully be able to get back to you sometime soon. Thank you all for your interaction. There are a few more things we just want to gather from you. So if you are feeling generous, we'd love if you could stick around just for another 10 or 15 minutes, just to help us understand how can FAMS, as your peak, continue to support you in the next few months? What will that look like? What's beneficial? We're definitely open to hosting more sessions like this, or sessions around topics that are important to you, which we are surveying soon as well. And while you're filling that out as well, I just want to thank you, Anthony, for answering all those questions. I know that was a bit of a rapid fire thing, and there was a lot of questions coming through. And also thanks in advance for providing a response to the rest of the questions that we weren't able to get through. Someone commenting, can you give me more time to get all of this done? It's such a busy time. I wish I had those powers. Unfortunately, we at FAMS do not have mastery over time and space. But I feel you. Session was helpful. Continue sector conversations. Yep, more questions to run. Clear answers. Someone's wanting a transcript. We will be. We are recording. Sorry, we're recording a session and we'll post that. Probably, I think, sort of early October, just with the conference workload, is when that will be released. So you should be able to listen back on this as well if there's anything you've missed. Yep, information dissemination, training and new program logics, and more Q&A sessions. Okay. And yes, there's a couple of challenges I note with CPUs as well. As Anthony's mentioned, there is that escalation process as well. If you're not having any joy with that as well, we're happy to hear from you directly as well if there's anything we can do along the way to resource you or to at least link you in with the right person if that's challenging. So feel free to reach out to us. It's info@fams.asn.au if there's those specific instances. Oh, that reminds me, Anthony, that there are a couple of questions around whether we can share these slides with participants. Is that something you'd be happy for us to do?
No, we're not intending on
Right.
sharing these slides. As I mentioned, the CAFS negotiation fact sheet that's attached to the TEI inform is really the thing that we'd encourage you to share with the sector. That has all the links to the resources available on it.
Cool. Thank you for clarifying that. Sorry, that was another one that came up quite frequently in the chat. Yeah, it is a lot of information. I think some of you commented around that. So we will have a recording as well, and I will do my best if I manage to over the coming weeks to summarize some of the Q&A that we've done today as well, if that's helpful. So just a quick survey just around what you'd like us to delve into next. We do have a sector conversation next week around foundational supports, just to consult with all of you as a sector around that. But we'd love to know, following that session, what you'd like as a priority. So there's a few options there around sort of DEX and translating your new contracts into DEX, the evidence portal, and I know some of you in that previous slide mentioned wanting to understand the evidence base, wanting to discuss that deeper, developing a theory of change, especially in regards to your program logics, as well as, I know there were a few questions today as well around supported playgroups, parenting programs, available models, and how you vary that. If you selected other as well, I encourage you to pop that out in the chat as well. Yeah, program logic templates and decks are very popular ones so far. I'll let that hit a little bit more, and then we just got one last question to ask all of you who've stuck around this long, which is it's just a little quick survey around how we're doing. It is very important to us to know we're hitting the mark. Obviously happy to see the strongly agree, but also if you disagree or we haven't hit the mark as well, you know, I'd love to hear about those opportunities for improvement, and you know, our commitment is to all of you as a sector, our commitment is to support you as a sector. So if there is anything that we can be doing better, differently, more of, we want to hear that as well. All right. Thanks, everyone. That's pretty much it for today. I'm mindful you're all busy. I know there's comment around having more time. So although I haven't manipulated time itself, theoretically, you've got 10 minutes back today. If there's anyone who has sort of additional questions or things like that, again, happy to hear from you. Happy for you to send me an email, or we can make a time as well to have further conversations as we go along. For those of you who are coming to a conference on Thursday, it'll be great to see you all in person. Oh, Elizabeth, you've got a question. Did you want to? Sorry, I can't hear you.
Elizabeth just wants to clarify if indexation is going to be just this year or ongoing. There's a few people who really need that answered.
Yeah, I can answer that. You may have heard me talk about indexation in the past. So Treasury makes a determination on what programs in DCJ and other government agencies are entitled to indexation and how much, and that can vary across programs. Treasury only makes that decision year to year, so we don't actually know from one year to the next what programs will receive indexation and which won't. So TEI is a program that has historically received indexation yearly, which is a good thing, but we won't know whether it will receive indexation next year until Treasury makes that decision and tells us. It's unfortunately a circumstance with which we have to manage each year. So I understand it is difficult for organisations to manage your budgets, not knowing whether you will get indexation from year to year. Unfortunately, we don't know either until we know, and then you know, we tell you.
I do see we've got one last hand. Are you happy to take one last question, Anthony?
Sure.
And then
Yep.
we probably should wrap up. I'm just conscious that some people have left as well, so I want to be respectful of that. But yes.
Yeah, this isn't really for Anthony so much as, sorry, Anthony, I did contact the DCJ and I did get a stock standard answer. I will be taking further parliamentary actions around finding out why we didn't get funding, and I suggest anyone that didn't do that. Secondly, it's more about at the Central Council meeting tomorrow, could some strategies be put in place for those of us that haven't been entering into a contract, been asked to enter into a contract? I haven't told my staff yet. One staff member knows. I've got to put a whole employment strategy in place now. I also have lots of questions over asset returns, intellectual property, and a whole lot of things that I don't think that necessarily can be answered. What if we finish off the contract, but we stay open for a few months more? Do I have to return the assets and within 20 days? All of those sorts of things, because I've picked off the human services. So this is more as a strategy from DCJ with some courtesy and the sector development or the state peaks about some of the emotional, and I'm not coming on because I am very upset, as you would understand, and I don't want you to see my face after 3 hours sleep last night on about how I'm going to deal with this with my staff. But I think there needs to be some strategies put in place. And that's all I want to say on that.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you for sharing. I wanted to let you know from the PICS perspective, we will be reaching out to anybody who has not received their funding to provide an opportunity for a debrief and for some constructive feedback on the process, which we will be able to put a submission back to DCJ. And I can guarantee that the TEI Council will be discussing how we support the services who have not received their funding, and some of that may be done by DCJ and some may be by us, but we have already set a date. I think it's the 9th of October, Daniel, where we will be inviting
Yes, it is the 9th of October.
to a safe and confidential space for the sector if they would like to debrief. But I'll hand over to Anthony as his thoughts, but definitely we'll be discussing this at the TEI Council from a FAMS perspective. It's probably top of our agenda.
Yes. I'm giving my EAP provider a heads up because I've had a staff member just enter into an offer on a property last week. You know, I've got to deal with all of that. And I know that's an employer, and I've been an employer for hundreds of people at a long time. But these are the unintended consequences. And we should have been told a lot sooner, Anthony. And that will be my only nasty word to you.
Thanks, Margaret. I understand it's a difficult time. And the Central Council is meeting tomorrow, and as Susan said, the peaks have raised this issue with us before. So
we should have been told a lot sooner. In the contracts, it's usually a 6-month notice period in the Human Services Agreement. I know we were all told that we may or may not, but I remember specifically saying to you, if we weren't going to get a contract, we should have been told a lot sooner. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. We're hearing you. This is a very difficult time, and we'll certainly be repeating your story to the TEI Council tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
It may be my PhD study, actually. The whole process has been a dog's breakfast. And I would have said that regardless of whether I got a contract or not.
Absolutely. We hear you. And I'm sure there's a lot of other people who would like to be able to say what you have. So we're hoping that providing that safe, confidential space, we may be able to get some more people to be able to provide that feedback to DCJ and to government on the process. I'll hand back. Do you want me to, shall I finish off, Daniel? I think people are starting to leave.
If you'd like to, I think people have, yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for your time and for your candid questions and robust questions. I've been trying to keep track of them as well. We will go through them and get as many as we can, at least across to DCJ, that they may be able to put into the FAQs. We will get this transcript sorted and onto the next wrap that we have. Hopefully we'll get to see lots of you at our conference on Thursday, where hope is our strategy. So ending on a as happy a note as we can, that we sometimes need to take some time away to really refocus. And I'm sure Daniel would agree with me and the whole FAMS team that this sector is incredible and there's some amazing work being done out there, and we need to be celebrating that, whilst we're also mindful of those who will not be continuing their contract. So we'll see you at our next sector conversation. Thank you to Anthony, and thank you to Daniel for amazing facilitation between Menti and the chat. Certainly something that was beyond my capability, so really appreciate